Have you ever wondered about the terrifying phenomenon known as rogue waves? These towering monsters of the deep appear without warning, defying logic and challenging everything we know about the ocean. In this video, we dive into the mystery behind these deadly, unpredictable waves. Forces so powerful they have shattered ships, swallowed sailors, and left behind only whispers of their existence. A deadly encounter at sea. Our tale begins with an unsolved maritime mystery from 78 years ago. It was June 1945, and the U.S. Navy's Task Force 38 was patrolling the waters off the Philippine coast. The fleet moved steadily across the vast ocean when, without warning, the sky darkened. Black clouds churned above, and the sea itself seemed to rise in fury. Then came the waves. Towering walls of water surged from the depths, slamming into the fleet with unrelenting force. In an instant, dozens of warships were engulfed. Chaos erupted over the radio as distress signals crackled through the static. CV-20! CV-20 calling! Wind speed 60 knots! Wind speed 60 knots! We are hit by massive waves! The ship has suffered severe damage! Severe damage! Admiral William Halsey, leading the fleet, immediately ordered evasive maneuvers. But soon, the radio transmission from USS Bennington CV-20, a newly commissioned 33,000-ton Essex-class aircraft carrier, fell completely silent. When the storm finally relented, the battered fleet limped back to Leyte Gulf, where the scale of destruction became clear. 33 warships were damaged, 6 sailors went missing, 76 aircraft were lost. But the most chilling discovery was the USS Bennington's fate. It had not returned. The massive aircraft carrier was eventually spotted outside the harbor. But as the rescue teams approached, they were met with a sight so horrifying it defied explanation. The ship, designed to withstand the most brutal oceanic forces, had been crushed into an inverted V-shape, as if an unimaginable force had slammed down upon it. Nearly all of its aircraft were gone, swept away as though they had never existed. What kind of force could break a warship of that size? A warning from the past, ignored. To find an answer, we must travel back over a century earlier, to the year 1826, inside the halls of the French Academy of Sciences. Before a panel of esteemed scholars stood Navy Lieutenant Jules Dumont d'Urville, a decorated naval officer, a renowned naturalist, and a man who had seen the impossible. His voice was calm but firm as he recounted his harrowing voyage across the Indian Ocean. He and his crew had encountered something unnatural, a wall of water rising from the sea, more than 100 feet high, appearing out of nowhere. The scholars scoffed. Mathematically, such waves are impossible, one scientist declared. A wave of that size would require an unfathomable amount of energy. What kind of storm could produce such a force? Another professor turned to d'Urville, barely concealing his amusement. Lieutenant, you are a man of science. Before presenting such wild fantasies, have you at least attempted to calculate their feasibility? D'Urville held his ground, but his crew had had enough. One of the sailors erupted in frustration. You bookworms, this is what we call a rogue wave. It has nothing to do with storms. It appears out of nowhere like a rabid beast, strikes suddenly, and clings to its victims like a mad dog. If you survive, it vanishes, leaving nothing behind. The sailors swore that their voyage had been plagued by multiple rogue waves, each one more terrifying than the last. They had barely escaped with their lives, and yet their testimony was dismissed. D'Urville, ever the professional, simply bowed and made one request. If nothing else, gentlemen, record my observations. One day, you may find them useful. But could such waves truly exist? For centuries, as science advanced and our understanding of the ocean deepened, the idea of 100-foot rogue waves gradually faded into obscurity. No mathematical model could explain them. No physical theory could justify their existence. And so, scientists dismissed them as myths, mere sailors' tales, exaggerated by fear and imagination. But when U.S. naval experts examined the wreckage of USS Bennington, something changed. The legend of rogue waves, once buried in skepticism, resurfaced. A shocking confirmation, 1974. Decades passed. Then in 1974, a discovery would send shockwaves through the scientific world. It began with an ordinary voyage. The Norwegian cruise ship Wilstar was returning to port, its passengers and crew expecting nothing more than a routine docking. The sea had been relatively calm, the journey uneventful. But as the ship prepared to enter port, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Something that would change everything. For centuries, sailors had whispered of a terrifying legend, a force lurking beneath the waves, waiting to strike. A tale passed down through generations, dismissed by scholars but never forgotten by those who dared to sail the open sea. But after the Wilstar incident, that legend returned with a chilling force. In the North Sea, fishermen had long feared a monstrous beast, the Kraken. Some swore it was an enormous golden squid, its tentacles vast enough to pull entire ships beneath the waves. Others spoke of a colossal octopus, its limbs coiling around vessels like a serpent, dragging them into the abyss. To them, the sea itself was alive, filled with unseen horrors. A well-known warning echoed among the North Sea's most seasoned sailors. If you wake up to an unbelievably large catch, flee immediately. That's the Kraken's breakfast. Leave before it gets angry. No one has ever survived the Kraken's grasp, and no one has ever seen its true form. So when the Wilstar, battered and broken, returned to port with a gaping hole in its hull, the whispers began. Had the ship encountered the Kraken itself? A nightmare at sea. Survivors told of a nightmarish scene. The ocean turned pitch black. The massive cruise liner, weighing tens of thousands of tons, was tossed about like a mere matchbox. It was hurled skyward, then slammed back down with a force that sent shockwaves through the decks. The waves roared like a beast from the depths of hell. Far in the distance, an eerie green glow flickered across the horizon, casting unnatural shadows upon the turbulent waters. Wave after wave crashed upon them, 10 monstrous waves, each one more terrifying than the last. And then, as the crew struggled to regain control, a horrifying realization set in. The ship's bow was gone, torn away, vanished. The sea had been calm just moments before. Then, without warning, the waters turned a deep, unnatural green, followed by absolute darkness. And then a towering wall of water rose from the abyss. Had the Wilstar fallen victim to a rogue wave, or was this something far more ancient and far more terrifying? A hidden truth in an ancient painting. In their search for answers, experts turned to an unexpected source, a painting. The Great Wave off Kanagawa, the legendary work by Hokusai, had fascinated the world for centuries. To the Western eye, it was a depiction of a tsunami, a towering wave formed by an undersea earthquake. But Japanese sailors had long insisted otherwise. To them, the painting was not of a tsunami, but of something far more unpredictable, a rogue wave, an untamed monster of the sea that could rise from nowhere and obliterate anything in its path. For years, Western scientists dismissed this idea. They believed only seismic activity could generate waves of such immense height. But the Japanese sailors pointed out a crucial detail. Look at Mount Fuji in the background. In the painting, Mount Fuji sits far in the distance, tiny and insignificant. Yet, the wave in the foreground dwarfs it. If this were a tsunami, they argued, it would only rise when it crashes into land. But the wave in the painting is rising in the middle of the ocean, isolated and alone. It is not a tsunami, but something else entirely. For centuries, the Western scientific community scoffed at this interpretation. But now, they were forced to reconsider everything. The USS Bennington's fate, the Wilstar's near destruction, the first photographic proof of rogue waves, captured off the coast of Spain in the 1940s. What if Hokusai had known the truth all along? What if rogue waves were real and far more terrifying than anyone had dared to believe? the first photographic evidence. In 1940, off the coast of Spain, a single photograph changed everything. It was a simple, grainy image, but its implications were earth-shattering. Captured in the open ocean, it showed a massive wall of water rising ominously from the depths. There was no storm, no seismic activity, just a towering wave appearing out of nowhere. It was the first undeniable proof. For centuries, rogue waves had been dismissed as sailors' myths, mere exaggerations, figments of overactive imaginations. But this photograph proved that Japan had been right all along. Scientists, now forced to confront the truth, faced an even more unsettling question. How? A tsunami, before making landfall, is only a few meters high in the deep ocean, its power spread thin across vast distances. But the waves described by sailors, 100 feet or more, seemed to rise spontaneously, towering like watery mountains before vanishing without a trace. They were not caused by earthquakes. They were not caused by storms. They followed no known physical laws. For centuries, science had denied their existence, but the sea had never stopped producing them. And now, at last, the world had seen them too. Do rogue waves truly exist? For nearly a century, scientists believed they had the ocean figured out. Using the Gaussian function model, they could predict wave heights based on wind speed. The math was simple. If a storm produced 12-meter waves, the model estimated the highest waves in the area would reach around 15 meters. A 30-meter, 100-foot wave, on the other hand, would require hurricane-force winds of at least 195 miles per hour, 87 miles per second, a storm so powerful it would occur only once every 100,000 years. By this logic, such waves should not exist. But there was a problem. The impossible becomes reality. The USS Bennington disaster, the Wilstar's near destruction, the 1940 photograph of a rogue wave off the coast of Spain. None of these fit the model. There were no storms, no earthquakes, no known explanation. And yet these so-called mad dog waves had struck without warning, with devastating force. They defied every known mathematical principle of ocean physics. So, did rogue waves exist? The answer would come from Norway, the homeland of the Kraken legend. In the summer of 1994, the Norwegian government constructed a massive offshore oil platform in the North Sea, the Draupner E platform. It was unmanned, designed to operate autonomously with only periodic maintenance visits. For 6 months, it functioned flawlessly, its systems collecting valuable oceanic data. Then, one day, a team of scientists arrived, ready to analyze the data. What they found would change ocean science forever. The moment that changed everything. What the scientists discovered left them stunned. The engineer overseeing the monitoring system, known as Mr. P, could hardly believe his eyes. His first reaction? The system must be malfunctioning. But as he combed through the data, triple-checking the instruments, eliminating every possible error, the truth became undeniable. His instruments had recorded a wave standing 85 feet high, a wall of water twice as tall as any surrounding wave. It was an impossibility. This wave didn't just exceed expectations, it violated them. It shattered the Gaussian wave model, which dictated that waves of this height shouldn't exist in those conditions. It contradicted centuries of accepted ocean physics, which insisted that waves couldn't form spontaneously at such an extreme height. And yet, the data was real. The wave had slammed into the Draupner E platform like a vertical wall, and the platform's sensors had recorded an impact speed of 72 kilometers per hour, 45 miles per hour. This was no storm wave. This was no tsunami. This was something else entirely, and it wouldn't be the last. In the spring of 1995, the scientific community made an official declaration. Rogue waves are real, but this announcement only deepened the mystery. How did these waves form? And were they truly as rare as the Gaussian model suggested? occurring only once every 100,000 years? As tension mounted, scientists turned to space. Satellites were redirected to monitor the North Sea, hoping to capture a rogue wave in action. And then they realized something terrifying: a fatal miscalculation. For decades, scientists had made a critical mistake. They had fallen victim to a major statistical flaw: survivorship bias. The concept was best illustrated during World War II. Allied forces, desperate to reduce aircraft losses, studied damaged planes that returned from combat. Engineers noted that bullet holes were concentrated in the fuselage, wings, and tail, and logically suggested reinforcing these areas. But then, a statistician stepped forward with a chilling realization. Are you all fools? Planes hit in these areas still managed to return home. That means these hits weren't lethal. The planes that got hit in other places, those never made it back. If you want to reinforce anything, it should be the places with no bullet holes, because those are where the fatal hits occurred. That one insight changed wartime aircraft design forever. And now, scientists studying rogue waves had reached a similar revelation: the dark truth about rogue waves. Why had no one documented rogue waves before World War II? Had these waves only recently begun appearing? Or had they always existed? But in an era before steel-plated ships, no one ever survived to tell the tale. Perhaps for thousands of years, rogue waves had been common, but every ship that encountered one had been obliterated, leaving no survivors. Could it be that the terrifying legends of sea monsters, mythical waves, and oceanic beasts were not myths at all, but eyewitness accounts dismissed by science? The answer would soon become unmistakably clear, and it would shake everything scientists thought they knew about the ocean. Then in 1978, another maritime disaster shook the world, one that would further solidify the terrifying reality of rogue waves. A 40,000-ton freighter stretching 856 feet in length had only been in service for 6 years when it vanished without a trace. Its name was MV München, the unsinkable superfreighter. Engineers had designed the München to be the most advanced cargo ship of its time, built to withstand even the most extreme storms. Some even called it the unsinkable superfreighter. Yet, on a December night in 1978, as it sailed through the North Atlantic, it sent out its final distress signal: position North Atlantic, rogue wave, starboard list 50 degrees. And then silence. The search for München. What kind of wave could tilt a massive freighter 50 degrees to one side? When search teams scoured the Atlantic, what they found was even more horrifying. The München had vanished. All they recovered were a few lifeboats that had been ripped from the right side of the ship, their steel bolts sheared off completely. But there was one terrifying detail. These lifeboats had been secured 82 feet above the waterline. Even if we account for the 50-degree tilt reported in its last message, the wave that tore those bolts apart must have been at least 89 feet high. The shadow of the rogue wave had surfaced once more, and just like before, there were no survivors to tell the tale. Shortly after the München disaster, something even more terrifying arrived: satellite data from space. In the year 2000, the European Space Agency, ESA, launched a new mission, Project Maxwave. The goal? To answer a question that had haunted scientists for decades. Were rogue waves truly as rare as the Gaussian model suggested, occurring only once every 100,000 years? Or had the ocean been hiding a deadly truth all along? Dr. Wolfram Rosenthal, the project's lead scientist, explained, over the past 20 years, extreme weather has been blamed for the loss of over 200 large ships, including super freighters and cruise liners over 200 meters long. Now, with our Earth monitoring satellites in place, we hope to finally uncover the truth behind these so-called freak weather events. 1 year later, the results stunned the world. For 3 weeks, ESA's radar satellites scanned a 1,930 square mile section of Earth's oceans, collecting data at an ultra-high resolution of 33 feet per pixel. What they found shattered everything scientists thought they knew. In just 3 weeks, satellites detected over a dozen rogue waves exceeding 25 meters, 82 feet in height, a direct contradiction of the Gaussian wave model. A phenomenon that was supposed to happen once every 100,000 years had occurred over a dozen times in 3 weeks. The rogue wave was no longer a legend. It was a global threat. At the same time, in 2001, 2 massive ocean liners, MS Bremen and Caledonian Star, encountered rogue waves in the South Atlantic. A 100-foot wall of water crashed into MS Bremen, shattering the ship's bridge windows and temporarily disabling all power. The Caledonian Star fared even worse. Its navigation and communication systems were completely destroyed, leaving it stranded until a rescue vessel could tow it back to port. The waters where these rogue waves struck are known by another chilling name, SHASH, the Antarctic Bermuda Triangle. Could rogue waves also be the true secret behind the Bermuda Triangle? How many other hidden forces of the ocean remain undiscovered, and would there ever be a survivor who could capture live footage of a rogue wave attack? In 1980, aboard the S.O. Languedoc, a supertanker, that answer finally came. A sailor named Philippe Lavoie managed to take a photograph that proved rogue waves were real. Look closely at the right side of the ship's hull. At the time of construction, the ship's railing stood 82 feet above sea level. Yet, in Lavoie's photograph, a colossal wave nearly towers over the deck. But the most terrifying detail? Beyond the wave, the ocean is perfectly calm, as if nothing unusual is happening. Lavoie later recalled, "It was an 8-story high wave that came at us from the right side, completely out of nowhere. Before we could react, we were lifted into the air like a toy, then slammed down again. Our tanker was fully loaded with oil, and the force of the impact nearly capsized us." The S.O. Languedoc survived. But what about the ships that didn't? In 2018, researchers from Oxford University and the University of Edinburgh proposed a groundbreaking explanation: wave superposition. Through experiments, they discovered that if 2 separate waves collided at a 120-degree angle, their energies would combine, creating a rogue wave. They named this phenomenon the Draupner wave, after the 1995 North Sea oil rig incident, the first officially recorded rogue wave in history. But something even stranger emerged: the Schrödinger wave function. To their shock, rogue waves didn't fit any known mathematical models, except one: the Schrödinger wave equation, a formula from quantum mechanics linked to theories of parallel universes and quantum superposition. Could rogue waves behave like quantum particles, existing in an uncertain state before suddenly collapsing into reality? And if rogue waves could appear out of nowhere, then what about their inverse? Where there are wave crests, there must also be wave troughs. If rogue waves exist, could there also be rogue sea holes, mysterious ocean voids that swallow ships whole? In 2012, a German-Australian research team used mathematical models to predict the existence of these freak sea holes. By 2021, this theory gained traction when an Indonesian submarine mysteriously disappeared. After analyzing the case, researchers suggested that the submarine may have encountered a 100-meter deep rogue sea hole while underwater. And if such deadly ocean voids exist, then perhaps no one has ever survived to tell the story. Perhaps this is a harsh reminder of humanity's insignificance. Even with advanced science and space exploration, we still know so little about the ocean, a realm that covers 70% of our planet. What other unknown forces still lurk beneath the waves? Maybe in studying rogue waves, we are merely scratching the surface of an infinite abyss of the unknown. And with that, today's story comes to an end. Forget rogue waves. The rogue sea hole theory is the real nightmare. Are we truly safe at sea? Or is the ocean hiding secrets we are not yet ready to face?